I have good memories, I think, of my grandmother and grandfather. Grandpa was, in my estimation, a farmer. We had a lot of fun running through the meadow, in the creek, out to the barn, and he was always working. He was a quiet man. Grandma, on the other hand, was a very little lady. She very soft-spoken, kind, great cook. When we went to their house, she had a coal stove, cooked mostly ham. My father's father was born in 1890. His name is Albert Keller. And my father's mother, Euphemia Ann Simon Keller, was born in 1884. I always think of my grandmother. I always picture my grandmother as wearing an apron and standing in front of a sink, because she did a lot of work. She was a hard worker, and they had 10 children. They had 5 boys and 5 girls. And when we would go and visit them, the first thing we would do when we walked in the house was go to the bottom drawer on the right-hand side of the sink, because there was always something special in that drawer that we could play with. Mother's full name was Teresa Victoria Bisker Keller. She was born January 3rd, 1914. She was born in Freeland, Maryland. I'm sure she was born at home. Freeland, Maryland was in Baltimore County, right over the Pennsylvania line. So she went to church and everything she did was in Pennsylvania, but she was actually living in Maryland, in Baltimore County.
One of my favorite memories of Mother was when I was a teenager, around 13, and I had gotten my first record player. And at that time, the Everly Brothers were popular, and one of my favorite songs was Wake Up Little Susie. And we had a large living room, and I was in the living room playing the records. One time she came in, just at the time that Daddy was coming in the door, and they started dancing. And this was the first time that I ever saw them dancing, and it was just so wonderful. I just love seeing them dance. And, it's like, oh, Mother and Daddy doing this? You just don't think of them doing this. But they danced for the longest time. And I'll never forget that. She helped out with the Girl Scouts. And we were always Girl Scouts when we were younger. And one of the things that she did with all of us was teach us to make a doll. This is the doll that I made when I was a Girl Scout. My mother taught all of us how to make this doll, this kind of a doll.
One of the things I did learn from Mother, and it's a good lifelong skill, was sewing. I did a lot of sewing in those years, and I look back at pictures of myself in those years, and even for a while after I got married, almost every piece of clothing I had on in any of those pictures I made. So I did a lot of sewing, and I learned a lot from her. And I remember she used to say, "You're not a real seamstress till you've sewed your finger." And sure enough, I sewed my finger one time when I was making my wedding dress. And that was the other thing that she got all excited about, because I made my own wedding dress. And I remember she brought all the ladies she worked with at the sewing factory over at lunchtime, and so they could ooh and ah over it and all.
My father's name was Charles George Keller, and he was born February the 22nd, 1914. And his family always called him Charles, but everybody else called him Pud. Somebody or his friends gave him a nickname as Pud, and that's how everybody knew him.
Daddy always thought it would be the ideal thing while we were eating. If he wanted this contraption, he wanted to put a hole in the middle of the table and have a hose attached to the table, so that when you were done eating, you would just hose off all your plates and then have all the trash go down into the middle of this hole in the middle of the table and then just be ready for the next meal. But he never invented that.